Hello and welcome to the Motogp Xtra podcast. Joining me today, as always, is my co-host Rhys. Now, today we're at the TT of Assen, the probably most historic track on the calendar. It's our last race for 5 weeks. We have a whole month off until we go to Silverstone on the 6th of August. Rhys, halfway through the season, before we get into our topics today in our three classes, how has the first half of the season gone? And what do you think has been, in GP we'll focus on, who's been the biggest winners and losers?
Well, it's been interesting. I don't think this season's quite panned out exactly how everyone thought. I mean, the guy that's leading the championship, I think everyone was fairly certain it would be him. But there was always a little bit in the air there. But in terms of the biggest winners and losers, I guess biggest winner's probably Bezzecchi. To be fair, he's in a really good position. P3 in the championship. You could also maybe argue Martin for that because both of those guys maybe weren't down as championship contenders. Obviously, Martin, I think everyone believed if he stopped crashing, he would be. But I don't think people expected Bezzecchi to take quite as much of a step. I thought we'd get one Bezzecchi win this year, potentially. But I think he's got to be the biggest winner. Biggest losers, probably Marc Marquez. Obviously, all of the injuries he's had. Guess anyone on Honda, really. Mir, Rins as well. Oliveira, probably another big loser there. Fabio Quartararo, probably big loser. So it's not quite gone how we expected. Obviously, we kind of expected the Honda would be in a bit of a mess, but Yamaha are much more of a mess than we thought. Aprilia have sort of underperformed. The sprint races have gone down pretty well, I think, generally throughout the fan base, but unfortunately, it has seemed to lead to more injuries. However, it does at least seem the positive spin on that, which is weird to spin a positive on an injury, but trust me, I'm getting there. It seems like the riders are taking longer to return, so they are actually maybe being a bit more wary, a bit more cautious based on Marc Marquez. So, yeah, I think the season's been fairly... I guess the guy at the front is what you'd expect, but behind it has been quite strange and quite chaotic, really.
Yeah, pretty decent assessment, really, of the first half of the season. There's not much more else than that, really. If you really think about it, everyone came into the season expecting Ducati domination. We expected the factory Ducatis to go out against each other. They haven't battled once. Bastianini's half a race half a lap, and got sent over on top of his shoulder and
by Marini in about 3 corners into the season.
Exactly, and the fact the KTMs have been there, the Aprilias haven't been there, the Yama's been so far back. It's actually been a lot more of an interesting season, throwing some spices of a sprint race, and the season it's been better than I expected. I thought it could be a bit of a drab season with the Ducati dominance, but we're probably past that.
It's been better because Bagnaia has crashed so much.
Yeah, literally, it really has. It could have been already wrapped up already, but we're going to park the Ducati train there. I'm going to go straight to Moto3, as always. Danny Holgado drops the ball twice. Let's talk about his first one. Rhys, take it away. Holgado Saturday, how did it play out?
It was quite strange. Q1 was pretty stacked in Moto3, to be fair. You had Holgado, I think you had Ortola in there as well. I think Moreira may have also been in there, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not 100% sure on him. So Q1 was pretty stacked with some of the guys that we expect to be right up there this year. Holgado was his first lap wasn't good enough to get him through, but then obviously everyone was improving quite a bit on the second run, so it wasn't a massive issue as long as he did improve. And he was on course for a lap that would have put him through. There was actually quite a big pack of riders, and he pretty much stretched away from them, so he was going a lot quicker than all of them. Looked like he was going to get through. Literally at the penultimate turn, the fast left, I think he sort of lost the front in there, ended up going onto the green. Obviously that's his lap completely gone. Then he sort of rolled through the chicane. Obviously he had to go slow, but that was it. The session was over. And all of those riders in that pack behind did improve by a decent amount, made sure he definitely wasn't in the top 4, and he was actually at the back of the grid. So that was the first thing, obviously the qualifying session. Then, obviously, moving on to the race, he had to start from the back of the grid. But to be fair, in Moto3, yes, that's bad, but it's something you can come back from. Obviously, it's not really something you could do in MotoGP, but in Moto3, for example, just the way it is with the slipstream effect, if you're one of the better riders as well, on a better bike, which of course he is, we'd expect maybe he would be able to find his way through, but it cuts to him in the gravel at the double rights, and that was it, pretty much race over. In fairness, he did remount and ride around the rest of the race, but obviously nothing was ever going to come from that.
I think really he was hoping probably for a red flag. It was probably the thinking there, just being in the race, being on track, and worst scenario was get a red flag, and he's back there. He's back in with a chance of getting up some points. Unfortunately, his own mistake twice, really. The fact that he didn't kind of secure himself on Friday getting through to Q2 dropping the ball in Q1 and then dropping the bike in GP in the actual race. So unfortunately, it's the first crack. I wonder, and I thought this too when I saw him crash and I saw him remount and kind of go on a mission to regain some points. Is he just starting to think now, well, I'm in such a good position in the championship, I've done so well to now, maybe if I just get a great result here now, we go into the summer break feeling amazing, I have an X amount of point lead. Was it just a small mental change that he's put himself under a slight bit more pressure this weekend, thinking 5 weeks off now, if I could win at Assen, imagine the points I'd have going to Silverstone in 5 weeks time. I wonder, is there just something just in the back of his head, just kind of a little gear that's changed to make him believe that maybe the championship is closer than it is. And I think maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like maybe there's been a little change because he's not put a foot wrong all year. I think the top 6 all season until today. So he's been we've talked nearly every week about how consistent, even the weekends where you don't go, he's number 1 on pace, he still finds himself towards the front. So he's done pretty well, but unfortunately this weekend has just gone astray. But I still think he might go away and learn something from this. I think all the good riders learn from their mistakes. So maybe we come back to Silverstone in 5 weeks' time. Maybe he comes back and wins it, and that kind of proves a point. And so again, I just wanted to go away, rest up, kind of think about how it went wrong, and just kind of approach it in a different way. Because I think it might be this weekend. He maybe the bit of hype of he's the man for the championship. Maybe that got him a bit, but. We have to move on now to the classic Moto3 race at Assen, really. It was just your standard. At this point, I just call it a standard race because they happen so often that you can't even call them anything other than a standard race in Moto3. There was 10 riders and then a gap of about 4 seconds, then another 10 riders. It was just your typical modern-day Moto3 at a classic track. Rhys, what did you make of just the overall race? No particular performance for anyone, but just the fact that we had so many big groups throughout this field today.
Yeah, well, obviously it was a big pack. I mean, like you say, I guess, you say that it was like a 2023 Moto3 race, but to be fair, the 2023 Moto3 races haven't really been like this particularly. It's been more like a group of 5 or 6 pulling away at the front, or like, as we've seen in some races, just a couple of riders. So a bit more of maybe slightly more of an old school Moto3 race, with it being a bit more close together. I think it's just because, I mean, you look at Assen, you don't think it's a straight line speed track with all the slipstream, but because of the Moto3 bikes, they're a lot slower. You're flat out through a lot of the circuit, even though they're not straights, and that just gives you so much of the slipstream. It just scopes everybody together. Assen is obviously a rider's track, as they do like to say, but if you got the slipstream around like 3/4 of the track, like you're in a really, really good position, because you kind of think the same, like, oh, how come it wasn't like Mugello where there was only like 6 or whatever of them? But Mugello actually has a lot of the track where it's not so much full throttle, but on a Moto3 bike, obviously, there's so much of Assen, so allowed them all to scope up. And as well, everyone wants to win at Assen. It is like the special, MotoGP round. It's like the Monaco of MotoGP, isn't it? It's the one that everybody wants to win. It's the historic one it's been on the calendar every season, except from 2020, which of course was the COVID year, which is a shame they weren't able to head over to Assen, unfortunately, for that year, because it would have been nice to have kept that perfect record. But it's one everyone wants to win. Also a track where you can overtake as well. I know in MotoGP we kind of didn't see much of that, but back in the day there was lots of overtakes, lots of places you can give it a go, lots of different kinds of corner as well. Some bits that are all about carrying the corner speed, some bits late on the brakes. So it just is the perfect recipe for a perfect race. I mean, there's a reason why it's been on the calendar all this time. Yes, it's historic, but also the track is really, really good. Everyone really likes it, always produces good races. So generally, great racing at Assen. Assen just is a fantastic track, and all of that stuff together just made for a pretty decent Moto3 race today.
Yeah, bang on with the track. If you think right, throughout the whole calendar, you've kind of 2 types of track. You have a track that gives great racing. You could say maybe a Thailand, maybe a track that has a lot of heavy braking zones. Probably isn't the most rewarding to race on. It's probably a good track for overtaking. And then you have a track like a Jerez. Riders rave about it, but is it really great for the racing? No. And then you get the odd track, an Assen, for example. Riders love to ride it, they love to battle on it, and it usually produces good racing. And I think that's just a prime example of why, like I said, Assen's been around donkey's years, and how it's gone through so many changes, and they've kept up to speed with it, and it's kept on the calendar for a reason. Obviously 2020 was misery across the world, so we did lose it for that season, but overall Assen, it's so it is the one they want. You mentioned Monaco, it's exactly that. It's just the one they all want to win. But we're going to move on now to Jaume Masia. Perfect weekend. He showed pace all weekend. Holgado dropping the ball on Saturday, I mean, it was massively up for grabs that there could be a big chance to take points off him with him starting lower in the grid. With him crashing on Sunday, left Masia an open goal to take at 25 points, and boy did he do his job. Didn't look like he was going to do it for the whole race, but come to the end, I think a bit of experience from Masia, which we don't usually see. He's probably one of the more experienced riders, but he actually seems to drop his head at the crucial moments throughout many seasons. So really proud of him today. I thought he did a great job, and I was really happy to see him take 25 points. It just tightens up the championship, and it is neutral. It's great for everyone, really. What did you make of Ijama's performance today?
It was really good. I mean, to be fair, his whole season's been pretty good. Aside from Argentina, where he fell off from like second place trying to catch his teammate, he's not really put a foot wrong. He's been there every week. Because in fairness, he's on the Honda. It's not the bike to be on. I know the Leopard Honda is still pretty good. Like, it's there pretty much every week still. Obviously, a lot of the other Hondas aren't, so it is still that sort of that. It's like it's the best team, isn't it? Really, like IO and Leopard, like the best two teams in Moto3. And Leopard haven't got the equipment anymore necessarily, but they make the most of what they have got, so they do a good job. But Masia, you put it perfectly, really. Holgado drops the ball, and this was the weekend that Masia needed to therefore strike back. In fact, I said this when I was watching the race. I think I said to my mum, I was like, Masia needs to win this one because I think the guy was about 40 points. It was quite big, to be fair, because Holgado has been literally in the top 5 every weekend. Obviously, basically, like 20 odd points went there when he crashed at Termas. But then also, Messia's not been in the top 5 every weekend because, again, the Honda's not the bike to have every weekend, whereas Holgado has always been up there. But Masia, to be fair, the weekend where the Honda is a good bike to have, we saw Fanati up there as well, for example, on the Snipers Honda, which, fair enough, shout out to Fanati. He looked like his old self a bit more this weekend. But Assen is one of those corner speed circuits where the Honda does work pretty well still. And he took full advantage. His rival makes a mistake. He's right up there on a bike that works pretty well at the circuit. Like you say, using some maturity. Not something we've seen from Masia massively in the past. We've seen him make mistakes in these situations where it needs to happen, or in other teams and stuff in the past, we've seen him make mistakes. But it seems to have clicked this year for him. He's been pretty consistent, even though I was obviously saying he wasn't always there. He's not crashing out of like 8th place, whereas I think in previous seasons he would have done. He'd been crashing, trying to get into the top pack. So it seems like Masia has maybe turned a corner. This Leopard team perhaps seems to work for him because if you remember back to his previous stint with them, it didn't start off so good. He struggled to adapt to the Honda, but by the end of the season, he'd adapted quite well, and he was a formidable force. And it was kind of the general consensus. It's a bit of a shame he's leaving that team now because he's doing so well. So, yeah, hats off to him. He rode a great race. Like you say, it didn't look like he was going to win it the whole way through, but he was always there where he needed to be. And I think he'd kind of figured it out that as long as he was sort of towards the front by the end, he could run a really sort of try and run a fast last lap and just put himself in a good position. Great pass on Sasaki into the last corner, and obviously that's kind of the other side of the token is Sasaki always gets mugged at the last corner, so that's definitely an area he needs to improve on. But Masia put himself in the right place, pulled a great pass, did a great weekend overall, and 25 well-earned points there to close up to, what's about 15 to Holgado now? So
yeah,
come down quite a lot.
Yeah, so like coming into the last couple of laps, I was thinking to myself, like, there's going to be a crash here. First off, we're going to come to Mugnot in a second. He took pole today after his injury in Jerez. That was quite surprised me when I found out he had taken pole. He's not really the one lapper, but he is the scrapper come Sunday. Now, with about 3 laps ago, he ran off the track to the turn 8 section. I'm very bad with the names of Assen because they're so long and I can never remember them. The fast right-left section. He went through the left, rolled through it, and rolled straight off the track. Fell in behind Fanati and pushed Fanati off the track. He was so aggressive, and when we were going into these last couple of laps, I was thinking which one of them was going to get taken out by him. What did you make of Mugnot, really? Did you think he was over the line, or did you think he was just standard Mugnot today?
He was a bit over the line in some of the stuff he did. I mean, most of it was like reasonably okay. I think like a couple of times through the sort of the corner where Lorenzo had the massive crash with the where he hurt his back again. I don't know the name of it, the fast like right left at the end of like, the back straight. There he ran a bit wide in the left a couple of times there after like taking the lead. Made a few mistakes, but generally he was okay until, like you say, so on that last lap where he sort of just pushed Fanati off the track. It was really needless, just a bit over the line. I think he did something similar last year. I think he did he take out John McPhee here last year or something? I don't know exactly if he did. I seem to remember he took somebody out into the Bolt. I don't know if it was McPhee. I can't really remember. So he's back on the pace this weekend. Obviously, his leg is feeling a lot better. He's back up there, and he's being aggressive as per usual. So, yeah, pretty much what you expect from Munoz. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the video of the cool-down room where Onshu was talking about Munoz, but, you know, if Onshu's calling you crazy and saying that you're not too smart, but it's you can just get on with it, then, yeah, maybe you are a bit aggressive. So, yeah, a little bit over the line in a couple of places there, unfortunately. And I think it ruined Fanati's sort of run at a podium, and I guess unpenalised as well from Munoz, but I suppose you can't penalise too aggressively, but even still, he probably does need a little bit of a word in his ear at very least.
Yeah, just there's so many moves. I think at one point he tried to go around the outside of Sasaki into the last corner, and you're thinking, like, there's no need for that. Even on the last lap, that's even a bit excessive to try, so it's just... that's kind of his thing. He's come into class, he's been the aggressive one, picking riders up, but he's already had a big injury. You're going to get it wrong eventually, and you're going to T-bone someone. You're going to create massive war words between different riders. There'll be a big split. You just don't want to be in that situation. Now, he has the pace. It shows that he's well able to battle at the front, but he just needs to take it back a bit. But it was just strange for me today. But we're going to move on now to the last couple of laps. Last 2 laps, there was still your 8 or 9 from Messia, who was leading at one point, to Rueda, who was in P10. We had a group of 8, 9 could have won it. Where did you think the race was won in the last 2 laps?
At the last corner.
Easy answer, but you get the question.
Yeah. No, I don't know, because I'm struggling to remember everything that happened, because in Moto3 there's so many overtakes constantly, it's hard to keep track, but I think it's sort of, like, it really obviously was just one, like, right at the last corner, because there's only so much strategy you can do. Obviously, we said Messia did put his bike right in the right place, and, you know, he did. He made sure he was right behind sort of Sasaki through that section, and they were a little bit ahead of everybody else, and everybody else sort of closed up to them through that slipstream. But there is only so much, like, sort of tactics you can do when it's like one of those races, especially when, like, we say with Munoz, like, Fanati probably thought he'd put his bike in a good place, but then Munoz was forced to ride through him. So I guess it was won maybe earlier in the race by riders like Messia and Sasaki, for example, kind of figuring out where they needed to be before the last lap, just from things they know and how the races go. Like, for example, Onshu, like, managed to just about get up into 3rd place, but again, he still seems to be lacking maybe that tactics in those kind of battles, like, to put himself into a chance of winning. Although, to be fair, his last lap was quite good, the way he sort of dived at the inside. But yeah, it's a tough question, actually. I find it difficult to answer for once, actually. Usually, like, I can jump straight to a point and say this is where it happened, but I think just throughout the race, throughout experience, and there is just luck to it, to be fair. I mean, Messia obviously put his bike in the right place on the last lap, and he was always at the front of the race, virtually. He never dropped too far back, and I guess that is how you win Moto3 races. You know, if you're always trying to be at the front, trying to make moves, you know, that's how to do it. I guess, like, that's just what I'd say. I wouldn't say there was particularly a point in the race maybe where he won that. It was just his whole race, making sure he stayed at the front, and maybe, yeah, just Sasaki being a little bit too cautious into the last chicane. But it is hard to pinpoint a specific part of the race.
Where I would say it would kind of boil down to for me is he got into the lead about 4, maybe 5, 6 laps to go, and managed to make a small gap. Now, it wasn't enough that he could run away and finish comfortably in the lead, but he just stretched the pack slightly going into the last 2 or 3 laps. And when you had Monot pulling crazy moves, you had Artola running off, there was kind of behind the top 3 or 4, there was just kind of lots of noise and there was lots going on, and he tried to make the break. And I just feel like that moment there, just start to take the kind of tension out of the string, just create little gaps, very little gaps. Now, I want to stress that he made very little gaps in between other riders, and I think that just maybe made it that it wasn't a Mugello turn 1 in the last lap where there's 6 riders going in 5 abreast and they're all trying to go for the same tarmac. It was a bit more of a calm lap for the front couple of 2 or 3, you could say. But overall, you have to give it to Messia, really. He did play the right game today, and at the end of the day, got into the last sector, was gaining, managed to get the move done, was clean. Poor Sasaki, again, like you said, he's had his fair share of losses in the last corners of laps. But I imagine he's going to win one soon. He's too quick not to win. So it will come from. But it's, again, today was just a good weekend for the championship, really. It was a good race. We had a nice battle. Nobody got injured, thankfully, even though Mignot tried to kill everyone in his eye line. So it was a good race. It was probably, if you are neutral to the sport, it's exactly kind of what you wanted. You want to see the guy that was ticking all the boxes, taking big points each week, have an off weekend, and we got that. But we're going to move now to Moto 2, where different weekend. We actually have quite a bit to talk about in Moto 2, which is rare. Usually Moto 3, we can barely fit everything in, and GP with the sprint races to say. But Moto 2, I actually have quite a few notes there today. We're going to start with my man, my favourite little Japanese boy, Oyagora. Great to see him back. Qualified on front row, had decent pace. Finally, some sort of a shadow of what he could have been this year is kind of returned, and now he looks like he's the rider he was. Now, the question I'm going to ask you in a second, after you can give the breakdown of how his race was on the weekend, do you still think he's going to go to GP next year?
Yeah, we'll start off with the breakdown, and then I'll come back to that. If I do forget, do remind me, but I should remember. Yeah, it was great to see Igora back. He basically said in this sort of post-race sort of interview that he wanted to try and get one good race before. Actually, it might have been his post-qualifying intro that he said this interview. He wants to try and get one more a good race before the summer break, basically. And he did that. Second place. He's not been anywhere near that kind of performance all year. Jerez maybe was not too bad there, but he wasn't still really anywhere near winning anything. It seems like maybe he's finally sort of got on top of this injury. I think it was probably a worse injury than we were led to believe. I don't know if you sort of got that vibe, but based on what people were saying this weekend, it does sound like it was probably a bit maybe worse than we thought. But it does finally seem like maybe he's back on top. He beat Chantra this weekend. He was up there. He wasn't too bad in Saxon actually, but just didn't quite put it together in qualifying, and obviously that pretty much ruined his race. But yeah, it does seem like we've maybe got the real Iagora back now. Like you say, it's a shame because he was doing really well this weekend. We perhaps could have seen this. Perhaps he could have been a three-way fight, with Arbolino, Acosta, and Agora. But yeah, I think we should hopefully see some more performances like this towards the end of the season, this second half, and hopefully he can maybe pick up a few wins as well and just build up some momentum. But in terms of him going to MotoGP next year, I don't think he will now. I think he will stay for another year just to try and build his sort of confidence back up and build up some good results again, because of course he's not really going to be anywhere in the championship by the end of this year because he's obviously basically lost half a season. But if he could try and get a few wins and then maybe mount a title challenge next year, I think that's probably what he'll do, because to be honest, would you even want to jump on the MotoGP Honda at the moment? Probably not, because he's already coming back from an injury himself that he obviously picked up at, I think it was Rocco's Ranch, did he pick it up at? So obviously like a sort of motocross kind of like event, or well, not event, but somewhere where a lot of motocross training's done. But he's just coming back from a pretty bad injury himself. Does he want to try and pick up another one on the Honda? Probably not. So I don't actually think he is going to go up next year. I don't know. Be interesting to see what you think to that. But hopefully we can see some more of I at the sharp end this year, because it's still something that 2023 has been sorely missing.
Yeah, to start off just with his weekend, again, he showed glimpses throughout the season that he's still at his speed, but he just failed to put a weekend together, was really the way I looked at it. And for one reason or another, he'd be good Saturday morning, he'd be good in FP2 on Friday, he'd be good in certain situations, but he wouldn't be good from start to finish. And I think that's just, it all kind of boiled down to this weekend, is that we finally got him quick on Friday, got his good position on Saturday, and then was able to run his own race on Sunday and kind of show why he was number 2 in the championship last year and arguably should have been number 1. But in terms of him going to GP next year, I still think he could go to GP, but not on a Honda. I think Yamaha would be, if I was Yamaha now, I'd be strongly looking at him. A Japanese rider, he's small, he's probably going to be light on tyres, he's probably going to be good out of the corner. It's a rider that I think of like Danny Pedrosa, where he's that kind of stature, he's that kind of rider, where for years Yamaha tried to get him or tried to get Danny to jump ship to Yamaha, and it would have been great to see it. And we never got it. We nearly got it when he was almost going to go to Petronas, but he retired instead. And unfortunately, it was one of those things like, oh, what if? It was always one of them what ifs. Now we have Iagora coming through now, obviously Japanese versus Spanish, different nations, whatever, but he's small, he hangs off very much so. Similar riding style in some aspects, and I'd like to see him move up to GP. Now, I don't want anyone on a Honda, to be honest. I think Honda is like a death wish at the moment. And you point out the fact that every rider under the sun that's ridden a Honda this year has gotten injured in some shape or form. Or else you're Nakagami and you openly admit that you are not riding at 100% and you're riding around at maybe 90% just to make sure that you're not going over the bars, and he's openly honest saying that, like, when he's seeing Marquez do the things, he's scared for him, like. So you've that kind of going on. That's the Honda camp at the moment. If I'm an up and coming Moto2 rider, I'm doing everything I can to stay away from that. I'm doing anything I can. Even if you go to Yamaha, who are in the kind of a similar situation, I'd still fancy Yamaha over a year on Honda. At least with Yamaha, maybe 8 out of 10 races you probably don't get the result you want, but you don't see Fabio, okay, we'll take out today because he crashed at a high-speed corner, but you don't see him going over the bars or crashing 6 times a weekend, or every weekend breaking a different bone in his body. This weekend was slightly different, but Assen is one of those tracks, if you make a mistake, it usually is a big crash. Ask Lorenzo and Valentino that. It's just one of those tracks. But if I had my Agora, if Yamaha came in for me, I would jump ship them, as if it's possible now. You don't know, because he's come up through the Honda Asia team. You don't know, is he somewhat contracted to Yamaha or to Honda and wouldn't be able to go to Yamaha? But it's an interesting one for me. I'd like to see him. I am a big Agora fan. I have been for ever since he nearly won the title in Moto3. So it would be good to see him on the grid. I think GP needs a strong Japanese rider. We haven't really had one since probably Okawa, I suppose, 2003. Can't really think of any other strong Japanese riders. We had Hiroshi
Nakano wasn't bad.
Yeah, Nakano's, but I always felt like Nakano's always on the wrong
Nakano's better than Ayama was in MotoGP.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know Ayama got the 250 title, but...
Yeah, it's been a while. It's like, even if we're talking to Ayama, that was 2008, 2009. Nakano was 05, 06, that kind of time. So you're talking 15 years. Like, we haven't had a good, solid Japanese rider. And I think Nakagami came up with promise, but really just never kind of lived up to it. So it'll be great to see I have a good rest of the season, and maybe we'll see either go to GP next year, another year in Moto2. I think give him another year at Moto2, he could very, very easily win the championship next year if the likes of Pedro move out of his way. I still think on his day he could beat Pedro like he beat him today. I think I has serious talent. I really am a big fan. But we're going to move now right to the rest of the race. We had a breakaway of 4, including I. Rhys, what did you make of the Moto2 race? Was it your standard Moto2 race? Was it a bit different? Was it just an Assen race where all bets are off? What sort of race did we get today from Moto2?
It was a bit different. Usually you get maybe like 1 or 2 pull away, and there's usually quite big gaps between them. But to be fair, obviously we had Alonso Lopez hit the front immediately off the start, make a bit of a break. Then we had Agora and Dixon running second and third. We actually had Acosta had a pretty bad start. I think he qualified P6, and then he was about like P10. Like, by the way, like halfway around the first lap or something like that. He'd not had a good start, but within a few laps, he'd got his way back up into 4th and basically caught that group at the front. Lopez had built a gap out early on, like a second or so. That just slowly got eaten away, and then we did have a group of 4 just running really, really close at the front of the field, which is just not something you get in Moto2. I think you probably make a good point saying it is a bit more of an Assen thing. Like, I can remember previous Moto2 races being a little bit like that. I think 2019 was like that. I think even last year was a bit like that, or maybe not last year, but actually last year played out remarkably similar, because I think Lopez took the lead early on, and I think Agora and Dixon were following him, and I think he dropped back towards them. So I think it did actually follow a similar structure. But I remember sort of 2021, I feel like the 2 IO guys, the 2 Mark BBS guys are up there. So it does seem to be a bit of an Assen trope that allows riders to go a bit better in Moto2, probably just because you could take different lines for a lot of the sections. I don't really know. But not your typical Moto2 race with massive gaps between all the riders. It was a much more entertaining affair. Yeah,
I must say it was one of the better ones, because we had the ongoing story all weekend of Jake Dixon make a quick Friday, top the combined sessions. Probably should have got pole position on Saturday, bar some naughty Pons boys. We'll come to them in a second. We haven't them in the notes, but we will make a small
actually, I do want to talk about them.
You were quite heated about them, so we will come to them in a second. I will throw the question across to you in a second about them, but we had Dixon having a very, very, very good weekend. A lot of British support thinking maybe we see Dixon finally do it. And to be fair, he showed pace that weekend. There was no reason why he couldn't do it. We saw Iagora having his best weekend of the season. We saw a return to form somewhat for Alonso Lopez. He was there, maybe didn't have the equipment in the race. It seemed like that. Got the start, got to the front, and then just absolutely ate his tyre. Sometimes Dixon was literally riding alongside him at ease with the rear grip he was having. Now, whether that was riding style or equipment, it really looked like the Motogp Xtra chassis really just didn't have any love for the rear tyre, because it just did not pull out of the corner at all. And then we had the Acosta Arbolino situation, where Acosta qualified a bit lower than usually. Of late, he's kind of been top 4 nearly every week in the qualifying. Obviously got pole last time out, and that was a magnificent achievement for him. But he's usually, if I'm on the front 2 rows, I'm okay. But this week, just being slightly on the outside of row 2, anything could happen when you're in that middle there. You're in a bit of a hot spot, really, when people qualifying P7, P8, P9, thinking, whoa, if I get to start and I can jump onto the back of him, like a Canet, for example. If someone like that, you always think that maybe you might chance it to start to one of those riders. So Arbolino being 10th, it was just one of those races where you look down through the field, you go, well, he's kind of out of position, he's kind of out of position, he is better pace, but the guy on pole is probably going to be hard to overtake. So there was a nice story brewing after qualifying that we did not know how the race went. In the end, really, Rhys, what did you make of it? You can sway yourself onto the puns thing after, but the break of 4, did you expect the likes of Arbolino to make it up and to make it a 5, 6, or did you just expect the 4 to pull away and just kind of, basically, did you expect anyone else to tag onto the other 4?
Before the race, I did kind of expect that Arbolino would be there. I know he'd qualified 10th place, but he's done that previously this season, still come through. And to be fair, he's looked like a decent match for Acosta this whole season, but after the first few laps, it seemed clear that he was struggling. Mark VDS as a whole were a bit off this weekend. Sam Lowes was struggling as well, which is... Sam Lowes actually did pretty well in qualifying, but in the race he kind of dropped back. So maybe they'll have to have a look at that, because, you know, if both riders are struggling a bit, then probably is more of a team or a setup thing or something like that, rather than just chance. So yeah, I kind of expected Arbolino to be up there, but after the first few laps, it was pretty clear that he sort of wasn't going to be. Obviously, like you said, there was a story of the whole weekend. Obviously, Dixon sort of getting the hype up because he'd been so good at this circuit before. The Brits always go pretty well at Assen. It is, it's on the British Superbike calendar. Well, it's not anymore, but it was for a fair few years on the British Superbike calendar. So a lot of the Brits have been there. It's also maybe just a bit more. It's a bit more of a. It's less of a Spanish-y, Italian, European-y track, you know, those kind. It's a bit more of an old school circuit, so it's a bit more like the British tracks in that way. So they always seem to go pretty well there. Crutchlow always used to go well there. Dixon obviously has gone well there the last few years. Lowes used to go pretty well there generally. Probably some of the others as well. I can't even...
Reading nearly got a podium on a Pramac before a tyre failure.
Yeah, so there you go. Like, it is just one of those tracks that... does suit them quite well, but Dixon just was picking up the pace. He really was the man to beat this weekend in terms of pace. I mean, we've seen this before, and it's not panned out for him. But he really, he topped the stuff on Friday. Then I think sort of Saturday morning, I think he was just doing race stuff. So I think people did go quicker than him, but he was just practicing for the race. Then we came up to qualifying. He felt like he could have got pole position. But both the Pons lads, we'll jump to Q1 first. Dixon wasn't in that session, but Sergio Garcia was. He did a lap that got himself up into P4, goes into the first corner, and then crashes, which, by the way, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. It happens. It's an easy corner to crash at. No one's ever going to crash on purpose. Let's be honest with that, right? So that's just an incident that happens. But then afterwards, he tried to get the bike started again. Again, perfectly normal thing. Everyone tries to do that. But once you can't get the bike started, the marshals usually take you away, and that's it. Your bike goes back now on the back of the truck, or you try and start it off in the escape road, not the escape road, sort of the service road. We've seen that happen many times before. I think Marquez did that Sachsenring last week. That's the general thing that you do. But Garcia just stayed in the tarmac runoff, trying to start his bike up, or at least pretending to try and start his bike up, and then basically just sat there till the end of the session because there was a couple of minutes left. That was it. No one could improve. He was P4, and it secured him spot in Q2. Fast forward to Q2, and Canet get himself onto the front row. I can't remember exactly where he put himself, but he put himself somewhere. Again, crash at turn 1. It does happen. It's nothing wrong with the actual crash. Again, tries to restart the bike, fails to do so. Again, that's standard. But the exact same as his teammate, he sits in the tarmac runoff, trying to do it for ages afterwards, after they've already failed, when really should take the bike off, try and start it somewhere else. And that keeps the yellow flag out for like 2 flying laps, and that apparently cost Jake Dixon pole, according to him anyway. He was really mad when they got into Part Ferme, talk about how Canet had just been sat there. Interesting thing is that those incidents were virtually identical, and Garcia got a penalty for his. Canet did not. Why? I don't really know. Clearly, it's something that needs to be brought down upon quite harshly. Remember back to the World Super Sport last year? It's like Most. I think Agata got taken out, and he kind of lay on the floor just trying to get a red flag, and then immediately got back up, and then he ended up getting suspended for the next race because obviously his attempt to try and get the red flag hadn't worked, and he ended up not being able to rejoin, but he actually got suspended for the next race for it. So there is precedent for this kind of thing, that you can get a harsh penalty, but yeah, for whatever reason, I don't know why they decided to do it, but they did, and well, can it go away unpunished? So I'd expect to see it again. I feel like there was suspicion that he'd done that once before, but I could be wrong. But anyway, that's completely really tangential. We just wanted to get it in there. So we had that whole story building up for the weekend, and then we just got into the race, and yeah, it didn't quite pan out how I thought it might going into the weekend, but as the story sort of progressed, the only thing really missing for me was Arbolino. I was surprised that he wasn't quite up there.
A massive segue now. Listeners are going to become very confused. We're going to go to Texas 2014 when little Aaron Canet was on the Estrella Galicia Honda.
You remember this? Yeah.
He high sides out of penultimate corner, basically lies in the gravel to try and get a red flag, as all weekend he was the quickest man, and then binned it in the race. Didn't get a red flag, the race went on, they managed to get him up and out of the gravel, but he tried his hardest to get a red flag. So that's the incident, people. I haven't heard BT or anything said at that over weekend. I missed most of Saturday, unfortunately, so a lot of it was more of the timing screens I was seeing more than actually footage of the TV. But it was 2014 in Texas. He high sides out of penultimate corner.
Was it not 2017?
17, sorry, 14 would have been way too early for him. Must have been 17.
14 was the Alex Marquez year.
16, 17. Anyway, it was
something like that, yeah.
The year escapes me, but penultimate corner has a huge high side. Now, he wasn't injured because he goes and lies in the gravel, and I think it was actually Michael Laverty at the time says he's lying in the gravel trying to get a red flag. He kind of calls as he see it. And as soon as basically they pass around and the double waved yellows are still out, and the fact that he then realises his red flag is gone, jumps up, walks away as if nothing's happened. So there is a bit of that in him, yeah. You are correct in saying that there is a little hint of, shall we say, some sort of unneeded kind of needle in terms of trying to kind of con the officials and stuff. So it was terrible to see, first off, that both riders in that team, the team, in my opinion, there should be getting a harsh financial penalty for that, because
definitely
it's clear that both riders were instructed to do this. Now, whether both riders decided to do it in their own accord, you never know. They're riders, they're ridiculously stupid at times. They can think things.
Canet might have seen Garcia do it and just thought, oh, that's a good idea.
Exactly. Whereas it was clear that Garcia, like the Rosberg 16 Monaco, where he went down the escape road and got a yellow flag out, it's kind of that thing where, like, oh look, now I agree completely, neither of them crashed in turn one. I don't believe that they would crash, because as long as
didn't crash on purpose,
as long as they're on the bike, a rider will believe he can go quicker, he can always find time and improve his time. But the fact that they both crashed in turn one, be like, well, if I stay here, the yellows have to stay out, and sure, then the laps are gone. It's a horrible situation. I don't even like to be talking about this, because it brings the sport into disrepute and stuff, and it's just not great really it's just for the sport in general. It's not a good look. So we're going to move swiftly on. But a bit of a darker moment that we don't really see, but it is there from time to time. I think it does happen more often than we see, but not always is it broadcast and is it picked up on. But Arbolino, we're going to touch him briefly before we go on to the big black round things called tyres. There was a lot of issues with tyres today, but Arbolino, look further off over the last couple of weekends. We came here, qualified 10th, pretty standard. Didn't really seem to have anything for anyone, really. Would that be a fair assessment, Rhys?
Seemed like it, yeah. He didn't really have the pace, obviously, in qualifying on the race. But then again, like you say, qualifying's not been his strong suit. He's come from that position a few times. But yeah, he really wasn't. He just wasn't there in the race, was he? He was never in the front group. I don't even know where he ended up. Was he about 5th, 6th, something like that?
5th or 6th, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think he did sort of. I think he beat. Did he beat Alonso Lopez in the end, or did he just finish just behind him?
I think it was behind him. I think it was a Bosco score of 4th and 5th.
Yeah, so he must have been like 6th then. So a bit of a poorer weekend for him. He got lucky, to be fair, that Acosta had the moment that he had.
Yeah,
it could have been a bit worse in terms of championship points. But yeah, I don't actually have a lot to say about Arbolino, because I mean, obviously, I did speak about him a bit before. But yeah, he just didn't seem to sort of have the pace this weekend. And Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of champions ride, I guess. You bring home P6. He kept on board, so he couldn't really do a lot more. He beat his teammate again as well. So, yeah, I think even though the result he won't be happy with, it's an okay result to go with into the summer break. It's not a crash. He didn't have the pace of Acosta this weekend, but he limited the damage as much as he could, and Acosta didn't capitalise as much as he could have done. So, yeah, actually, even though it looks disappointing on paper, maybe not the worst weekend for Arbolino overall.
I think what we're just seeing at the moment is that we've gotten out of the awkward couple of rounds at the start of the season where we go to Texas, Termas, some weird races. There's always a bit of weather. There's always something in them races. We've gotten into European part of the championship where everyone says you win the start of the European, you kind of win the championship. It's usually the way it goes, and it's kind of true in most cases. But I think we're just seeing now that Acosta seeding is just that bit higher than Arbolino. I think Arbolino is doing a very, very, very good job at bringing home max points each week. He's kind of doing what Holgado's doing, except Holgado doesn't have an Acosta or a superstar in the class that is able to get for second, third every week, really. And I think that's just... I think I mentioned this last week after the race that I feel like he just needs something extra. Now, there's a very fine line between something extra and ending in the gravel, and then you get no points, and then you're out of the championship, because if you have to go chasing Pedro Acosta, good luck with that. You're not going to start taking points off him week in, week out. Finished third today, kind of a bit of an unlucky race for him. Things went against him in some aspects, and we'll get to that in a minute. But just for Arbolino, I just feel like that he's very close to his ceiling, and I think he's performing very well, but I just don't think he's going to be able to sustain this for much longer. I think by the time we get to Misano, we could probably be talking how he's on the back foot and he's going to have to produce something to take it to the final few rounds, and we'll say the flyaways, because at the moment he's being steamrolled by Acosta week in, week out. He seems to be getting beat pretty comfortably, and that big points gap he's had is dropped to 8 points now, I believe it is. So that could be gone after the next race in 5 weeks time. So just wanted to kind of touch a base again with him. But we're going to move now to the tyres. Literally from lap 1, Alonso Lopez seemed to have no rear grip. Whether that was a setup or bike, weather, track conditions, bad tyre, I don't know. I didn't hear anything about it, but it just seems like the Calyx had so much more grip now. From lap 1, the commentators and presenters were always saying it's going to be an attritional race. They're going to wear the tyres, but usually in Moto 2 it's the front tyres. We saw the slide from Acosta into the final corner. Did you think that coming into the last 5 laps that the tyres going to play a big part, and do you think there was going to be crashes? I was a bit on the side that maybe a Dixon or an Acosta trying to just push a little beyond his luck might get bit. I felt like the tyres were really holding back, but it's interesting to see what your opinion on the tyres were today.
I didn't actually give the tyres much thought, to be fair, during the race. I mean, the only person I saw have massive tyre trouble was Alonso Lopez, and he clearly just pushed his tyres too much, because I don't think it's not a bike thing, because his teammate actually caught and then passed him because of that, despite doing a long lap himself. So actually, shout out to Ardiguer, actually had a pretty good weekend this time, and hopefully he can try and bounce back from that, because it's the first time we've seen much of him since probably Termas last year. Yeah. He's not really done anything, so yeah, hopefully he can try and bounce back from that. But yeah, I guess the only times I was thinking about the tyres was thinking that, as this race goes on, Dixon will probably get more of an advantage, because he seems to be the best rider in the class in terms of the late race pace. He's like the sort of Vinales from a couple of years ago of Moto 2. He has so much more pace than everybody right at the end of the race. So I was thinking that once the tyres go off, actually will play a part in him. Obviously, Acosta had the front end slide. I don't know whether that was caused by the tyres or just a coincidence. Obviously, it does happen. I think he got it a bit hot maybe as well. But yeah, really the only person I saw with massive tyre trouble was Lopez, because nobody else really seemed to drop back massively. So I think they were probably limited because it was so hot. But those Dunlops they just go forever, don't they? Really. I think they were probably maybe saving their tyres at the start of the race, the guys at the front. Maybe if you look further back, there's other riders that dropped through the pack, but out of the front line was only really Lopez, and obviously you could call that one by the fact that he just went straight away like a scolded cat, off the line. He was gone straight away, pushing really hard, whereas you saw Agora, Dixon, even Acosta, although Acosta did have to fight a little bit to get his way back through. They sort of sat back a bit more and sort of maybe looked after their tyres and just let Lopez shred his, and then him come slowly back towards them.
Yeah, it was something throughout the race that I thought To be honest, I didn't think the top four would all finish. I know we had Aldair come in. We had Canet make a good charge towards the end, so it kind of ended like a group of 6 towards the end. But for the most part of the race, it was the 4 that we mentioned previously. But I just felt like coming into the last couple of laps, I know Dixon's good as tires, but I just felt he's going to risk everything here for the win. We already saw Costa. After the Costa's moment, he looks like he backed off. Like, yeah, P3 is good for me. He got a penalty. Very controversial. We're going to cover that next in a second. Ridiculously controversial. But I just felt like that. There was just, if I felt like the race was kind of determined by the tyres. The fact that Iagora has probably not been up there all year. Correct me if I'm wrong. The tyres are different this year to last year.
I couldn't tell you. I
think they have a different front this year, but I could be wrong in saying that.
I think they might have had a new option. Don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
It might have been one of the options from last year is now the main tyre, so it will probably have suited some better than others. But yeah, the biggest tyre change I know of is that they're not going to be Dunlops next year, supposedly. So
supposedly, yeah. I thought we'd get an announcement of that this weekend. But
yeah, I was expecting an announcement of that, but
probably during the summer break.
But yeah.
But yeah, I just felt like it was a very dependent race on tyres. Like we saw Alonso Lopez destroy his tyres, and then we saw Dixon. Dixon had great pace and also managed to save his tyre. He did brilliantly, but we'll come to Dixon last. We'll give him his praise towards the end. A Costa penalty. Rhys, take it away.
Well, we mentioned it obviously previously. The Costa had a bit of a front end slide. So going into the last chicane with, I don't know how many laps to go, it was a few. He lost the front going in, had to pick the bike up, did a really good save actually, and then had to go straight through the chicane. Now, I don't know why, but every year when you come to Assen, if you cut the chicane, you have to give up a second. I don't know why this is a rule, particularly. I think just giving up, like, it shouldn't be. So, I get that it's hard or fast so that it's like fair, but like we saw Aldeguer, for example, earlier on, cut the chicane. He lost 2 positions basically in that corner because he lost one on the entry, then ran through the chicane, put his hand up, let Aranas through, and he still gets a long lap penalty because he didn't lose a second. But he's lost like a place, so that's probably going to cost him more than a second over the whole race. But then I also don't understand that if they're supposed to lose a second, why is the penalty not just a 1 second time penalty? Why is it a long lap? Like, why leave it up to the potential that they can't give themselves? Like, they can't give themselves the right penalty. They don't know how much a second is. It's pretty hard to estimate. Whereas they could literally just add a second to their time. So, yeah, it makes no sense to me with that one. But that's not really the controversial part. But I just wanted to sort of say that I thought for a start that it's a bit stupid that they give them a long lap for that. They should just give them a 1 second penalty if they want to say that they lose a second. But Acosta then did his long lap penalty with a couple of laps to go. Rejoins just in front of Fermin Aldeguer, but as he was doing the long lap, the commentators pointed out that it seemed that he'd sort of got his front wheel on the inside of the white line and onto the green, and therefore, as we know, would have to reset the penalty. We've seen this a couple of times this year so far. If you go outside of the lines with a long lap penalty, you have to reserve it. So, for example, Alonso Lopez back in Mugello, even though he went through the gravel and lost himself so much time from that, he had to redo the long lap penalty. Fabio Quartararo at the last corner of Jerez ended up going on the green. Again, didn't gain any time, but he went on the green during his long lap penalty, had to redo it. But Acosta was never told to redo the long lap penalty. He was never given any kind of warning or anything like that. It did take a while for the indicator next to his name on the graphics to disappear. It took about till they got round till the next time for it to vanish. So clearly it was under review, but it just wasn't mentioned at all, basically. And the commentators were pretty confused. Some of the other teams were not very happy. I think Mark VDS, and was there another team as well? There was at least 2 teams.
There was 3 in total.
Three in total. What teams were they?
I know of Mark VDS and I believe Speed Up, Bosco. I don't know the third team. Yeah, you'd imagine probably Pons maybe was kind of behind them.
Yeah, probably. But they launched appeals basically to say, look, he didn't do the long lap penalty properly. He needs to have a 3 second time penalty, which, yeah, I guess is how the rules go. But so far, I don't know what the result of that is. I don't know whether they've been thrown out, but there has now been a CCTV image, which is what the stewards also used for making decisions, floating around of Acosta doing the long lap. And it's a very blurry photo because it's CCTV, but from that photo, it does appear that he's within the white lines. Again, I'll ask, we'll see what your opinion is on that one, but from what I can see, it does look like he's in the white lines. And it is hard to tell from certain camera shots because sometimes we have seen in the past things look like they've gone over the line, but they haven't. And in other sports and stuff like, I think football, they have like multiple angles to see if a goal's gone in. I mean, I don't really watch football, but I know that is a thing. I'm pretty sure. So sometimes it can be deceiving, but it does seem pretty clear that he's gone on the inside of the green from the TV shot, but then on the CCTV shot, it's not so obvious. So, yeah, I'm not sure what to call this one, but there's a lot of controversy. People, saying that he's got away with it. People saying that because he's Spanish, he's got away with it, which is the typical thing that comes out when, obviously, any Spanish rider basically gets away with the penalty. But I'd be interested to see what you think to it, but I don't really know how to call it because from the evidence, it is unclear whether he's gone on the green, but I'm sure the stewards surely must have more information than we do.
I'm going to disagree with you thinking it's unclear. I think it's an absolute open and shut case that he's gone on the green. First off, the fact they put out an image of CCTV. We've HT pictures of the Titanic, which is 11,000 kilometers below sea level, but yet when Pedro Acosta at a Grand Prix track, they can't get a decent image of him. There's a drone camera that goes through the corner next. He definitely could have got picked up by that one. There's a camera on the outside which clearly shows that he's over the white line and probably clearly on the green. Now that camera, he's leaning away from it, which means the bike looks like it's leaning further, but he's definitely not on the tarmac. The CCTV one is just blurry. It was just like a sad attempt at him, like, oh yeah, that's what we used. Whether they use it or not, I do not know, but I've seen a lot of people saying they're protecting their golden boy, and like it's clear as day he touches the green. It's clear as day on the footage. I have no doubt in my mind that it's a penalty, and it's race direction just not getting it right and making a bad attempt to cover up their mistake instead of going and giving a penalty after the race. It was so easy. It was so easy
to rectify as well. You just give him a 3-second penalty because in fairness, because he didn't actually give him one in the race, it puts him in a better position because they can actually alter the results. Whereas if they gave him a long lap and it wasn't fair, then there's nothing they could do about it. So yeah, it is an interesting one. But yeah, carry on. Sorry.
It's just bad stewarding again, and it's inconsistency. We've already talked about the Sergio Garcia and Aaron issues. We will get to. There's more stewarding going to be mentioned in the GP class now. This seems a bit more consistent, but the issues we have later are probably not even steward issues. They're just bad rule issues, really, just badly written. To go back a small bit, you mentioned that why don't you give him a 1-second penalty? They used to do that. Throw your mind back to Texas once again, 2017. Zarco going into the snake, throws a wheel underneath Valentino, picks him up. Valentino looks across him, goes straight across one of them. He was given a 0.3 penalty. Now he ends up pulling away from Zarco, catching and passing Pedrosa, and puts 0.9 into him, beats him. Penalty gets overruled, or it gets gapped basically, so it didn't come in. Finished second. Why we've gone backwards in the last 5-6 years to go away from having penalty point systems, a license for like the whole penalty point system to work over a long period of 2 or 3 seasons. These smaller and more, we'll say, customizable penalties instead of a banhammer where everything's kind of put into the one mixer and like, yeah, that's a long lap for all of that. Where it's like, well, that's a really severe incident. This is a minor little incident we've had here. They really shouldn't be classed as the same thing. So the stewarding at the moment is very weird. I wonder, are they trying to go like follow F1's lead of being very, very like managing it, micromanaging it maybe, but whatever they're doing at the moment, it's wrong. We should go back to the way they should have it, where every rider has a license. I think it lasts for 2 seasons and then it gets kind of reset. So it's just at the moment everything is kind of wrong, and we're week in, week out talking about inconsistencies, bad decisions by the stewards, and just kind of the rules kind of being a bit weird. But it's not great. We're going to move on now though, because we spent pretty long time on it. We're going to come on to Delightful Dixon. Rhys, your homeboy from Dover of all places, gets his win. 75 races I believe has taken him. Did you think today before the race he could do it? Did you have the faith? Did you believe in the British?
I thought he would have the pace in theory to do it, but we've been here before where he's been on pole position, or he's looked really fast all weekend. It's just not come together for him. It just it just is a case of the start. And as soon as he got a good start, I knew he was within a shot. But in fairness, it wasn't just a case of him being like the quickest, like usually, right? His starts aren't the best. He fights his way back through to a podium and is really fast at the end and is maybe troubling for second place or whatever, but the leader's already gone. And it's always been like, well, if he got the start and was with them at the start, he'd pass them probably halfway through the race and just clear off. But it actually didn't play out like that, how we thought. It looked like it was going to. He had taken the lead from Agora, and obviously initially it was Lopez leading, but the Lopez just got shuffled to the back of the pack. Dixon obviously passed Agora first, then passed Lopez. He took a while to pass Lopez. He struggled to pass him, but again, I think maybe just was trying not to overstress his tyre, not to go over the limit. But he took the lead ahead, and then basically literally immediately after, he was followed through by Agora and Acosta, both forced their way past Lopez. And he'd pulled out a little bit of a gap, but then he got false neutral by the looks of it going into the Strubben corner, dropped back down to third place. At this point, I was thinking, it's gone wrong again, because it's like maybe he could still get second place, but it looked like it's going to be pretty difficult for him to get back past, especially with one of them being Acosta as well. Acosta's not an easy man to pass. We get to, I think, the end of that lap or the end of the lap after. Acosta has this front end moment that obviously caused all this controversy, and Dixon actually gets sucked in wide with him based on that, because I think Dixon picks up the bike assuming that Acosta's going to crash and is basically preparing for that. But in that, he overtakes Acosta, because obviously Acosta's gone through the green and again probably gave up a bit of time and obviously lost time from the front end. So put him back up to second place. But at this point, Agora had like over a second lead, and there wasn't that many laps to go. Maybe 6. I don't know exactly how many laps, so there wasn't a lot. But then he started to take a few attempts out of him, and then with a few laps to go, he started absolutely motoring compared to him. He was taking time out of him, so much time. Caught him with a couple of laps to go. Went up the inside into turn 1. They sort of they almost, I don't know if they actually did touch or it was really close, but Dixon sort of went past into turn 1, went back to the racing line, wasn't fully ahead of Agora. Agora had to pick the bike up. I don't know whether there was a little bit of contact that forced it, but it was really close if there wasn't anyway. Agora had to pick the bike up a little bit, ran off the circuit, and that was it then. It gave Dixon enough of a lead, although I think he still pulled away, and he brought home his first ever victory. So to be fair, he really did fight for it. It was the quickest all weekend. He did deserve it. It looked like perhaps he could have won a race quite a while ago. I mean, really, if you think back to Le Mans 2020, he probably should have won that race. And then Portimao 2021. Like there's been not Portimao 2021, Portimao 2022. There's been a few weekends where he perhaps should have brought home the victory, but he did it in style, and he was the fastest on the day. And I think that was something we were saying last week that isn't very likely. That I don't know if it might have been you that said something like that. Like, didn't look like he'll ever beat them really on raw pace, but he did genuinely this weekend. It was his day, and he got the pace. I'm really, really happy with for him, and hopefully he can try and sort of keep on rolling, because he's up to third in the championship now. I mean, technically speaking, I know you're probably going to hate me for saying this, but he is technically still in the championship fight, even though he's a bit further behind. You know, you get a bad, let's say Acosta and Arbelier take each other out and Dixon picks up the win, all of a sudden he really is in the thick of the fight. So, this is an important win for him going into the summer break as well, building the confidence. It could just be another unexpected turn in the Moto2 championship, because we have seen this in previous seasons where someone that was sort of out of it gets one win, gets a fair few, and just puts themselves in it. It's not unseen. It's something that happens quite commonly in Moto2.
Yeah, I must say that Dixon really did everything right. He had the one misshift where he seemed to be pushing on to make sure that he got the bit of a gap and the bit of a buffer over the two behind, and he just wanted to maybe probably have a bit of a not relaxing, but he wanted to have some sort of buffer going into the last 4 or 5 laps when it came. But had the misshift, ran wide, lost a lot of time, because you lose obviously all up the straight. You lose through the fast Russian hookers. I don't know what their names are. Apologies, any Dutch listeners. A lot of the fast corners have really long names, but you lose your momentum and your drive and your flow through there. So not only would he lost 3 tenths there, he would have lost another 1.5 up the straight, maybe 2. Probably would have lost a small bit on entry. It was a bit messy, and you would have lost a lot of time. So for him to get back onto Acosta, obviously lost more time when Acosta went wide and had his mistake. Was over a second, was 1.1 at one point, and then just started putting in 36.7s, like lap record sort of pace, and just started to bring it down, and then he was there. And the overtake, I feel like he tries to squeeze Agora, and I think it just goes slightly wrong. I do believe they do touch. I think Agora was very lucky to stay on But as soon as then Agora goes wide, there's a gap, and then you're kind of thinking that you hope to God he doesn't throw it away now, because he'll never recover. Like it took him a long time to get over Le Mans 2020 when he crashed, when he should have won that one. He was so far out in front, had Lowe's behind him. Lowe's were catching, I believe, and he just overstretched himself. But I just think that he's been in the class long enough now. He's had a couple of good opportunities. You mentioned Portimao, you mentioned Le Mans. I also remember back to, I believe it was Mandalika, the first time we ever went there. The race was spitting, it was on and off rain, and he crashed in turn 7 while out of P2. I think Chancho was just ahead of him. So again, conditions you would favour a Britain that kind of on and off, a bit of rain here and there, that kind of mental rain, you'd fancy them, but he did tip off there as well. So he has thrown away a few opportunities to get this done, but I think the fact he's done it now, he'll believe, and going to his home race in 5 weeks' time. It's a great boost for him. But I'm going to ask you one question now before we move on to the Premier Class. Can he repeat it at Silverstone?
Oh, yeah, possibly. He looked really good there last year. I think he got the podium, didn't he, last year? Now he's got the extra confidence of having won the race. Then yeah, I think he probably can actually come and deliver it. It does depend how good, of course, some of the other riders are going to be there. You obviously never know how. Could be someone that just really, really clicks with the circuit and turns up really good, especially the speed up. So usually work pretty well there. But yeah, I think he genuinely could do 2 in a row at his home race, which would be a massive thing for him. But it also, he could crack under the pressure. It is going to be a lot of pressure on him.
Yeah, so we're going to leave Park Moto 2 there for 5 weeks. We're going to move on now to the Premier Class. Marco Bezzecchi, Prime Valentino at Assen. Where did that come from? We know he was quick last year, but what a step he's made this year. He was ridiculously quick Friday, great pole position on Saturday, and then comes out in the sprint and does that. Bezzecchi is a bit special.
Yeah, it was a fantastic weekend for Bezzecchi. I did expect him to be pretty good. I thought that potentially he could win this weekend, but didn't expect him to be quite as good as he was. Dominated all the practice, like you said. Pole position, dominated the sprint. Just unfortunately, the main race didn't quite go his way. I mean, it's still P2, but it's a bit disappointing to dominate the whole weekend, win the sprint as well, and then just miss out on the race win. It is a bit of a shame for him, but didn't quite pan out for him in the main race. But fantastic weekend, the kind of weekend he needed as well, because of course he struggled quite a bit at Sachsenring. He struggled quite a lot in the Mugello full race as well. So yeah, to get 2 podiums, pole position, pretty much top in every practice session. Fantastic weekend for Bezzecchi. Does help him out in the championship a bit. I mean, of course, overall he does lose points still, but for his belief, and also he obviously gains points on Martin, of course, but it's actually the leader. He loses points overall, but maybe just for that belief, going into the summer break with another good result will help Bezzecchi out quite a lot.
Yeah, he was. We talked about him last year. It was the race that made him in GP last year, finishing second to Pecco and kind of matching him all the way. Now, if you watch back last year's race, Fabio had crashed. Aleix had been punted off track. Pecco's probably already in his head had that race won. He was like, yeah, I'm just going to bring it back. I have a rookie behind me on an older Ducati. I'm going to just bring this home. And he probably did. Still, Bezzecchi was still good enough to bring home as a rookie under savage pressure from behind, and just at Assen, like everybody wants to do well and everyone's quick at Assen. Come here this year then, and he's made such a step between the off season, the newer bike, everything seems to be going his way. And I must say, like, overall, that the fact that he's won another sprint, again, I think he'll be slightly disappointed he didn't get to win in the full race. I think he lost too much time behind Binder. I think Binder was a bit of a rolling roadblock really, and really on a GP bike, we have talked to how, like, if you think back to, I think 2018 was one of the greatest ever GP races around there, when they had like Rossi, Marquez, Rins, you had Lorenzo, you had all the top guys. Vinales were in there as well. There was just a sensational battle for the win there. At the moment, the hydraulic lowering devices and the wings just make it slightly harder, but it was still a decent race. The sprint wasn't bad. The full race was a bit more of a tactical battle, as I felt like that Binder was always stretching to stay with Pecco, and I think we just saw Bezzecchi kind of get caught in that little misfire there in the crossfire, that the fact he couldn't get into P2 and get at Pecco. But we're going to move on now to someone who's had a misery weekend, injured again. No guesses for who it is. Marc Marquez. What is Marcus going to do over the next 5 weeks, Rhys?
Well, don't know. I think he's going to have a lot of phone calls potentially. It's going to be quite interesting. But of course, basically stuff that came out after the last weekend. Obviously, he had loads of crashes at Saxon Ring. We covered his obviously terrible Saxon Ring weekend in the last podcast. So if you didn't listen to that one, go and listen to it. What are you doing? But yeah, we covered that. He obviously had the crash in morning warm up for the race and pulled out the race. Decided not to race. But it was basically pretty quickly confirmed that he would be sort of returning for Assen. Now, at the time, we just thought he broke his finger when he crashed in warm-up, and he just was taking it out. But as we learned going into the Assen weekend, he'd actually also broke some ribs, and I believe he might have sprained his ankle as well. I think I did see that once, but I haven't seen that mentioned again, so that could be incorrect information. But either way, broke his finger. I don't know if it was actually his thumb, but he broke a finger or thumb on his hand, and also a couple of ribs, which I've never had that happen, but I can imagine it's pretty painful. Every time you breathe, it's going to be quite a lot of pain because obviously the rib cage around your lungs and stuff. So, yeah, we came into the weekend with discomfort. Again, had a pretty poor weekend. He was just slow. Again, probably because he was in so much pain, but also because he probably didn't want to crash. Had some weird incidents as well. He rode at the back of Bastianini in qualifying when he wasn't really looking. Don't know how he didn't really get a penalty for that because it was a bit weird because I think they both fell off right. I don't think Bastianini carried on.
No, Bastianini does ride on. Yeah, he just had a bit of damage to the mass dumper at the back.
Perhaps that's why then, because he didn't knock off the other guy. He just penalised himself. I guess that's fair. But yeah, it was a weird mistake to make. Was nowhere in the sprint. Ended up battling with Lorenzo Savadori over like P17. Which obviously is not even close to a normal race. Yeah, which he lost. I remember seeing a meme actually afterwards saying, we want Lorenzo versus Marquez, and it's like Lorenzo versus Marquez at home, and it was like Lorenzo Savadori, which is quite funny. But then he pulled out of the main race. So yeah, for Mark, much more injury misery, in a lot of pain. He said he woke up this morning with really bad rib pain, so decided not to race. But then, as the day went on, we then had some more news to do with Marquez. That was actually to do with Alberto Puig, was sort of asked about the sort of rumours of Marquez trying to break out the contract early. And he said, I think every person is free to do what they want in life. Honda is not a company that wants to have people that are not happy being at Honda. We have a contract with him, but also Honda respect Mark a lot. So the first time, really, that it's been publicly addressed that potentially he might break the contract early and potentially leave without penalty. It is interesting. Of course, we know there's a buyout clause, but we do, from what we believe, it's extortionate, so he's never going to be able to actually buy it out. But potentially, maybe he's just going to be able to walk away anyway. I mean, I'll pass it over to you to talk about everything to do with him this weekend, but even more, controversy. Like, obviously, last weekend, we basically saw the end of the Honda relationship, if we're being honest. And now that seems to have rolled on, along with the injuries he also picked up there.
Yeah, exactly that. Last weekend was the realisation, I think, for Marcus that I'm at this point in my career. I need the bike now. I need to really be winning. I can't, it's like Rossi when he went to Ducati. He doesn't have 5 years to sit and develop the bike. He just doesn't have that left in him. Unfortunately for him, he needs that KTM now. He needs that Aprilia now. He needs that Ducati now. He needs whatever it may be. He just needs that now. It has to come at a point in his career now where he's going to be able to get on it. Maybe have a season where he gets 3 wins and 4 podiums and he finishes third in the championship. Maybe that's what next year could be if he gets a seat. But the fact is, he cannot continue a Honda. I cannot see next year how we see a Repsol Honda roll out a Qatar with the number 93 on. I just don't see how. I just don't see how we can get there. I don't see what pathway do we see, because they come out as well. You mentioned they come out saying that everybody's free to do what they want. We don't want anyone here that doesn't want to be here. Blah 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 blah. They also came out, and Bradley came out and said, "We know what's wrong with the bike." Well, if you know what's wrong with the bike, surely you should be working towards it. Now, of course they are, but they shouldn't be making public statements that we know what's wrong with the bike. If I knew what was wrong with my car, I'd go fix that. Or I know now it's probably not the direct analogy, but it's the way they say, "Oh, we know what's wrong." It's kind of like, "Oh, we just need to fix it." Like when we whatever get around to it. But I don't. I wonder, was that a public statement to make it look like to Mark's like, well, we know what's wrong, we're working on it, and we'll have it fixed by next year. Was it kind of their last chance at like, please stay, we're lost without you, we can't do anything without you? I wonder, was that the last kind of hope at maybe keeping him at Honda? But I still think that the fact that we've got public from Alberto Puig that it looks like if he does get a contract elsewhere, they're not going to fight him and force him to ride the bike, which is probably best for everyone. Which means I go to factory Honda, Repsol. Could that happen?
Well, I thought you was going to Yamaha.
Don't know. Could sign for both of them.
Just keep swapping like every weekend,
Yeah, exactly.
or like every session just hops from one team to the other.
But yeah, so it's misery for Honda. It's misery for Mark. I woke up this morning, saw that he had pulled out of the race, and was kind of like, yeah, I'm not surprised again. That's 2 weeks in a row. He's won at Assen multiple times. He's dominated at Sachsenring. It's clearly not going to work next year for him. I don't see Honda fixing the bike in the time. I genuinely do not see in modern GP the fact that they went and made a whole new bike for 21 and first
22.
22, correct. And that Marcus wrote it, said it's worse than the last year. I have less feeling and I'm slower. So I don't know. I think we should probably move on from the Marcus to another sad French boy. But the last thoughts on Honda is that I just don't see Marcus. I think he's gone. It's gone too far now. They have to split, and it'll be better for both. Because I think if you're Honda, we keep thinking of this as the Marcus side of he needs this, he needs that, he doesn't need them. What Honda need is they need 4 good, consistent riders to rebuild. They don't need a superstar that rides outrageously different to everyone else and could do magic on the bike. They don't need that, because that's where you get into a situation where you have a bike that has a really, really, really on-edge front end that 1 in a billion people can ride. That's not what you need. You need something like a Yamaha from 2015, 2016, where you jump on it, oh my god, it feels great, I really can get close to them, I feel everything that's going on the bike. We're maybe missing a small bit here and there, but I feel like I'm connected to the bike, whereas everyone gets on the Honda now. The comments are, it's not as bad as expected, and then they start to try and find the limit, and then they end up in hospital. So, like I've already said, we're going to move on now from Honda to another one, but yeah, it's pretty miserable if you're a Japanese manufacturer in GP. Fabio improvements plus crash. Start with his Saturday race. It was a good day overall, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was looking like a good weekend, really, until obviously the main race. But if you look at Friday and Saturday, it finally looked like they had enough pace through the corners to sort of be able to carry it. We've seen a few times this season now, he's had a really good FP1 and looked like he's up there. And we're like, oh, Yamaha might be pretty good this weekend. But then when they get to FP2, they stick on the soft tyres, they try and make that extra step. They just can't. But this weekend, he seemed to be able to do that. And it probably just was because the grip was helping him through the longer corners. It probably was, actually being able to help the Yamaha improve. Assen, it is still a Yamaha circuit at heart, I guess. It's so high-speed corners. The Ducati can have as much air as it wants to help it turn. The Yamaha's better chassis will always just give it, like, a slight advantage in that department. Like, it's still good enough to keep the Yamaha in there now. There's not really many slow acceleration zones either, aside from Strubben. So that's really where they lose out, to be fair, the Yamaha, out of slow corners. And there's not that many massive acceleration zones, so it doesn't... like the new engine being too aggressive also doesn't cause them so much problems. So on Friday it looked quick. Saturday was really good, qualified P4, which was great. It was by far his best performance, probably his best qualifying literally since Assen last year. So yeah, great qualifying for him. He got away well off the sprint race. Was up running in 4th place for the whole race. Unfortunately, was the same typical Yamaha thing as he couldn't make a pass. Binder made a mistake, ended up going on the green. We'll talk about that later. Promoted Fabio to the podium. So first podium since Kota, obviously, that he got in the main race. But, of course, Kota was strange because of all the crashes. Just the weird track surface and stuff obviously made it probably less... Maybe did make it more dependent on the actual structure of the bike. Like, if the bike chassis is pretty decent, maybe, it took less of the emphasis on the electronics and the aero, I think. And with it being a strange weekend, obviously, he picked up that podium. But this is probably his first legit podium, really, on pace. I mean, I know he didn't technically finish that on track, but, the rules are the rules. You know, you go on the green, you go on the green. So Saturday was good, but unfortunately, then on Sunday, he got a bit beat up off the start. He didn't get the launch. He got passed by quite a few into turn one. Had to go off the track at turn one. Was obviously trying to push hard to make up some time. Lost the front through it again through the fast left where Lorenzo obviously broke his back in the day. Again, I don't know the corner names because I've seen them written down, but I have no idea how to even go about saying them because they're very, 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 very difficult to pronounce unless you're Dutch, of course. He goes down and unfortunately just collects Johan Zarco with him. Pretty nasty looking crash, really. Got helped away by the marshals. Have seen him after there was a picture of him with a sling on and also like a boot, so like a boot when you've like broke your foot or whatever. The sling apparently is for I think it was a twisted elbow, was it? Which apparently is something that should just heal, so that's not a problem. But he actually hurt his toe going into this weekend running. Apparently he might need surgery on that toe. So I don't know whether that's
he's getting surgery tomorrow.
Yeah, he's getting surgery on tomorrow. I don't know if that's been aggravated more by the crash or whether it was just that bad and he wanted to get through the weekend. I'm not too sure, but yeah. Weekend didn't end in such a good way, but it is something positive from Yamaha. Also worth noting as well, it was back to the usual Quartararo P4, Morbidelli P17 kind of weekend. It's clear that when the bike is working, Fabio can still make the most of it, whereas Morbidelli can't. So it's maybe a little bit of a negative there. It looked like Morbidelli maybe had made the step, and if the bike was working, he'd be up there with him too. But I think maybe it's more Quartararo dropping to Morbidelli's level than Morbidelli rising to his.
It's quite strange, really, because Quartararo all year looks like he's overriding it, and then you have probably Frankie's doing like the Nakagami strat of, I'll just ride at 80% and see what happens, and it looks like they met in the middle. But I think, yeah, you come to a track where Fabio is really strong. The Yama is strong, usually. And you just get a nice weekend for them, and I think it just shows, again, just how bad the Yamaha is, the fact that Frankie, who's been good on the Yamas throughout his career up until the last 2 seasons, that he's that far off, and the fact that Fabio had to go all above and beyond to get P3 in the sprint, P4 on the grid, and got a bad start in the race and got beaten up, and I think that was his race done. And even if he didn't crash, I think at that point in the race he was risking so much to... It's like, I think I mentioned this in every podcast I talk about either Marquez or Quartararo, that Senna, there's a great saying from Senna that you don't try and find time where you're already the quickest. And I think that's just what Fabio's doing. He's trying to leave the brake off with about an extra 3 miles an hour, and eventually it bites him, and that's what happened today. Unfortunately, Zarco got taken with him. It looked like Zarco probably got off better of the two. Obviously, you mentioned the twisted elbow and the foot injury that has been re-aggravated from the fall from running. No injuries reported from Zarco, which is always a positive. So it was going to be a good weekend, a kind of a bit of a boost going into summer break for Yamaha, but now their superstar is injured and their bike is damaged again in the gravel, and their number 2 rider was not even in the points when it happened. So a good Friday, good Saturday, and a terrible Sunday is probably what I would say for Yamaha. But you did mention the Binder penalties. We're going to come to that now. We got a penalty at the same spot in both races, cost him P3 twice. Do we have an issue with the penalty system in MotoGP race?
It's interesting. Obviously, there was a lot of stuff on social media saying that it was stupid, you don't get in time from it. And we get that every time, really, that this stuff happens, because it does happen. So it does happen. Well, Superbikes happened to Top Rack at Macri Core. I think it happened to Locatelli at Assen as well, the last chicane. I think it happened Jorge Martin, Austria 2020 as well, when he was battling Bezzecchi for the win. He just went on the bit of green that was on a straight for some reason.
Did Antonio Le Mans when he was in Moto 3?
Yeah, so
maybe.
Yeah, I seem to remember something like that happening to Digi getting a penalty, although I can't remember if it was for exceeding track limits or what exactly the rules were at that time, because I know that the last lap thing was brought in like when Digi was in Moto 2, because it was basically like a result of an incident he was involved in. So yeah, I can't remember exactly how it is, but generally speaking, if we may as well actually explain the rules very quickly. As much as I know them, I meant to get up the FIM regulations to be able to read it verbatim, but as far as I understand, basically the way the sort of the track limits rules work are, in a full length race, you get 4 unpenalised warnings, and then you get a penalty on the 5th go. as far as I'm aware. So I think you basically, after 3, you get a warning, then I think you get one more, and then basically the next one, if that's a penalty. Or it might be warning after 4, something like that.
You get 3, the third one will trigger a warning from your team, and the fourth one goes unpenalised, and the fifth one is the penalty.
Yeah, so I'm understanding that right. Yeah, so you get 5. Basically, you get 5 transgressions. You get 4 free transgressions in a race. On the 5th, you get penalised, and you get a warning on your dashboard to give you a reminder after 3. That's how it works. But then on the last lap, because I think basically it was because of what Augusto Fernandez did, right? But pretty much brought
Misano 19, right in front of my eyes. Actually, I was there.
Yeah,
it was
right in front of Dill's vision. He saw it happen. The scandalousness. But basically, Augusto Fernandez went miles off the track to carry a bit more speed, then just sent it up the inside of Di Giannantonio and bashed him out of the way, basically. Kept the win because he hadn't actually used up his four warnings, and he got a penalty. So after that, they decided that if you go on the green on the last lap and there is someone within half a second of you behind, you drop 1 position. So those are the rules, basically. And in the sprint race, it is slightly different with the sprint race this year. It's 3 warnings. It's 3 on the third one, you get a penalty. So you get, basically, the first transgression, you get a warning immediately, 1 more unpenalised, and then on number 3, you get a penalty. And in the sprint race, it was basically on the run down towards the Bult. I always think on the game, actually, I know it's a bit of a weird comparison, that why is that not just one long curb? It does seem a bit weird how it kind of curves around and then dips. But basically, Binder was riding on the curb, just goes off the edge of it onto the green because it kind of ends. I don't know why it's not just one long curb, because it kind of starts again afterwards as well, doesn't it? It's a strange one. I wouldn't be surprised if it's changed for next year by the time they get there, based off of this. But yeah, he dipped on the green, and it must have been his 3rd warning. So because it was his 3rd warning, he got an actual long lap. So he got a 3-second time penalty because it was on the last lap. So they couldn't obviously make him do the long lap. And that dropped him off of the sprint podium down to P5, whatever it was. Obviously, the people on the spectator cams, in the crowd, they saw it on the big screens. They started booing it, all that kind of stuff. A lot of uproar on social media saying it was a joke. But in my opinion, I don't have a massive problem with it, because whilst, yes, he didn't gain anything from it, and I really do sympathise, and I'm by the same opinion that, it's a bit unfair when they've not gained anything. But with track limits, it's hard and fast. The sensors, if you trigger the sensor, you get a warning. You can't argue it's unfair because it's the same for every corner of the track. Every corner of every track on the calendar, basically, that has green on it, there's a sensor. Yes, whilst it's unfortunate that clearly he didn't gain anything by that sensor because it's like the way the curb ends, if you trigger a sensor, it cancels track limits warning. It does it the same everywhere, so then there's no arguments for it. It's a black and white rule, and that's what you need with those kind of things. So whilst I felt sorry for him, it's absolutely fine. That was his transgression. So it was the 3rd one he did in the sprint race, so he therefore got the long lap penalty. We jump onto the main race, and he does the exact same thing. Now, for one, why did he not learn from yesterday? Like, to do the same thing again is actually bad on Binder more than it is on the stewards, in my opinion, because whilst, yes, it's difficult to tell, you'd think you'd give it a bit more of a berth, considering that you've done it yesterday, but whatever. That time, it wasn't his 5th transgression, which is obviously what it was. It was just another... I think he got a track limits warning for it at the end of it, but it wasn't the one that he actually gets the penalty for, so it just follows the last lap rule. And obviously, Aleix was within 0.5 of him, so he got demoted a position again. And again, obviously, there was uproar, but I don't actually see a problem with either penalty here, because whilst, like I've said, I know I've probably rambled on this long enough now, explaining the rules and everything, but I feel sorry for him because he didn't gain anything from it, but he went on the green on the last lap. If someone's within half a second, you lose the spot. That's the rule. And in the other race, he did enough transgressions to get a long lap penalty, so we got a long lap penalty. I feel sorry for Binder, but 1, he made the mistake twice, which he shouldn't have done, and 2, that is just the rules. So, yeah, I don't really have a massive problem. Whether maybe you could change the rules, that's a different question. Maybe you could. I think maybe the last lap thing should be scrapped, in my opinion. And it should also be a bit more, where clearly if it's egregious on the last lap, you got miles off the track or something. But if you get 4 track limits warnings in the race, you should be able to use them on any lap you want, if that makes any sense. If you get 4 free off-track passes effectively, if you want to use it on the last lap, use it on the last lap. You've kept it clean the rest of the race. So, yeah, maybe the rules could be changed, but following the rules that we've currently got, I don't see any issue with it.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is people are unhappy more with the rules, the way the rules are laid out at the moment. I think, to be fair, most people are right in saying that it is stupid. If you
Yeah,
have
definitely.
seen, if you have seen both incidents, he basically raised the edge of the curb. That is enough to trigger the sensor. So he is flirting with the limits and has been bit both times this weekend because it's a pressure sensor. So going off the edge of the curb, you're basically going to trigger the sensor to detect that you've been on it. I have no problem with the stewards saying, okay, he's triggered a sensor. That is the penalty. That is fair. They're doing their job. I give them enough grief when they do their job and they follow the rules. Fine, I understand why he was given it. I was disappointed both times because I feel like, there's no gain there. Like, you've literally, he's stayed on the track to some extent. He's just literally triggered a little sensor to pick up a notification that he's been close. Whether we can change that in the future, I don't know. I don't like as well the fact that his last lap you have to. I think this was brought in. It wasn't the last lap, but like there's different penalties for a lot of different things. We had Vinales Le Mans 17. He runs into the chicane, basically goes deep, picks up the throttle, wheelies across the curb, and then rejoins close to the Rossi. He gains a good bit back. I think a lot of outcry happened at the time of that because of kind of what the Pedro Costa penalty is like. I think that's also wrong. I think the fact that if you look at today's incident, he loses time because he loses front. He doesn't make the perfect race line. He then picks the bike up. He's going to be after having a little, whoa, I nearly crashed. He's going to lose time. He has a quick look over his shoulder, then loses time, and that's probably enough. He's lost a position. That's simply enough for me that he shouldn't be penalised further. The Binder incidents, he's not gained anything. He's not done anything to set up an overtake. There's no reason why that should be penalised other than a technicality, if that makes sense. It's a technicality that he's been penalised twice on. Fair enough. The track limit, the one for the long lap, it was his fifth time doing it, that's fair. But both times doing it on the last lap is, in my eyes, a technicality when there's nothing to be gained. So I think we need to look at the rule book, and then I think that is the way you go forward in future, and not be kind of trying to say that the stewards are being too harsh. The stewards in this case are just doing what the rule book tells them. Can't really blame them here. I try to blame everywhere else, but this time it's just the rules, and I think that is the issue. But we're going on long enough now. We have one final topic to talk about. We did see an Aprilia on the box. We did see one in the gravel. Aprilia, are they getting better? Are they getting worse? Do we know any more about Aprilia?
It's hard to tell. They looked better this weekend, in fairness, but actually do have a decent bit of flack for them, actually. We'll talk about the good. Obviously, Aleix got on the podium. A track where Aleix has gone well in the past. Pole position in 2014 in the Ford Yamaha. A fantastic ride up to fourth place last year after being punted off when he probably had the pace to win the race. Clearly, the Aprilia works quite well here. It's almost like a V4 Yamaha in a way, isn't it? It's really good through the high-speed flowing corners. And it struggles to overtake because it's not quite got the top end and the acceleration of some of the other ones. But it did seem to be better this weekend. Vinales was looking quick until he unfortunately crashed out of the race. Aleix obviously looked a lot quicker. They did struggle a bit in the sprint, but I don't think the sprint suits the Aprilia at all anyway. I don't think it has all year. Oliveira was looking pretty good. The only one really that wasn't looking good at any part of the weekend was Raul Fernandez. I think maybe we'll end up talking about him on a different podcast at some point, but for now I'll just gloss over that one. But yeah, it was a good race for Aleix. He was in the position to benefit from Binder, and it is nice to see Aprilia back on the podium because obviously it's the first time they've been on. Well, it's not the first time they've been on it this year, but it's the first time Aleix has been on the podium this year. Obviously, Vinales was on the podium back at Portimao. But my flack for them is that basically the entire time they've been in MotoGP, at least this recent period since the last time they came in, their bike has been by far the most unreliable with different problems. Like it's quite embarrassing, to be honest. Like, we saw Sachsenring, Vinales' bike blew up. Today, Oliveira clearly had a problem with his bike as well. He pulled in the pits. Out of all of the teams that have had problems with ride-out devices, it's definitely been Aprilia that have had theirs stuck on the most. Again, Sachsenring last year was Vinales. Somewhere else, I think, was it Cota this year? I think Aleix was stuck on. I think Raul Fernandez has got stuck on one weekend as well. And then I could think of lots of incidents like sort of 2019 and previous of an Aprilia going pop. So Aprilia have a lot of these like issues where like the bike fails or the engine fails or the ride-out device fails, and it's the other teams don't have this so much. It happens occasionally. Obviously, motors go pop. It's always going to happen. Like, they can be just as different in the part. The part might be a bit faulty, or the engines just explode because they're so close to the limit, or people's ride-up devices stick on it. Obviously, it has happened to the teams, but it seems to happen to Aprilia more. And like, as much as this is a nice weekend for them, that obviously they got Aleix on the podium, and fair play to Aleix, because how he did that with the wing hanging off, I still don't know. Clearly, the wing isn't as effective as it should be, because it should have affected him a lot more than that with the way it was sort of flapping about. But yeah, there's still a lot of negatives to take away from these last couple of weekends for Aprilia. The fact that, one, clearly they're not quick enough in the sprints, they don't get off the line very well, the bike seems unreliable, and yeah, I guess you can look at it the same way as Yamaha is. At least it has shown that on the day it has the pace, but it's good and bad to take, but they shouldn't get too carried away with the fact they got the podium, because yes, it was a great ride by Aleix, but there's still obviously a lot of problems going on behind the scenes at Aprilia.
Binder basically has gifted two struggling manufacturers a podium this weekend.
Pretty much at the same turn as well.
I'm a big fan of Aprilia. Now, I never really thought about their reliability issues. I know, obviously, when they were like the Grassini team, they were terrible. Not only did it was for a couple of years, like they came back after the CRT area. They took their kind of project there. They pulled all funding from World Superbikes and the RSV projects, and they made a kind of semi-GP RSV bike, and they eventually more developed it into what is a fully fledged GP bike that we have today. But they have had quite a few issues over the years. Now, of course, up until last year, they were just never quick enough. And even then, they still had the reliability now. And we know that they have decent money behind them of late. Like, they have a nice backing. So, just don't understand why they keep running into these issues. I can understand the bike not being quick, because that is the aim of the game, is to get the quickest bike out there. But you don't see Yamahas going pop that often. Definitely don't see Ducatis expiring. It's just... It's all, you always feel like it's the Aprilia issues. Like, it's like, oh, again, Maverick could have done this if this didn't happen. Aleix should have won if this didn't happen. You always feel like that there's always like an asterisk next to Aprilia because of, what could have been that weekend. So it's a bit strange. I'm a big fan of Aprilia. I really hope that I hope they can keep building, and I hope they can get rid of these hiccups, because if you remember last year, not only was the bike really quick, but they made a lot of issues off the track. Aleix at Barcelona, when he realised wrong laps. In Motogp, when they had the bike got stuck in like launch mode or something. And there was a couple of other issues throughout the season where I think there was a couple of qualifying sessions where it was mixed conditions and they all seemed to get it wrong. So there was a couple of procedure issues that we saw last year that it just showed they weren't a full factory race team at the front of their sport. They were still kind of playing catch up. So I think the whole project is still not right there at the moment, unfortunately. But never know. They managed to get Maverick over, and Maverick is one of the top riders in the championship on his day. And I think it nearly suits him that he rides for Aprilia, because on the day, the Aprilia is probably the best bike in the grid, but it's on its day. So you don't know really, and it's a bit of a mystery. But we have 5 weeks now until we're back at Silverstone, a track that Maverick goes quite well at, the Aprilia goes quite well at. So could we be talking about him next week? We don't not know, but we're going to leave it there. It's gone over 90 minutes, just by far our longest ever podcast. We'll be back in 5 weeks on the 6th of June, or 6th of August, I should say, for the next race at Silverstone, a home race for one of us, a rival race for the other. And we're going to leave it there. Hope you have enjoyed. Thanks for tuning in. We shall see you in 5 weeks.